if you want to like book a New England tour, you kind of at a certain point get stuck if you're at a certain level, and you either have to like play a smaller place than you might play, or like, do a hellish drive. And I think a lot of people like, instead of an off night or a hellish drive, let's play that place. I think that's the logic behind a lot of them.
As I was telling you at the top, I was in New York City for a very long time, in fact, and I probably said this in every episode of the show that you've been on, and I've probably mentioned this to you every single time that I've talked to you in person, but I saw Hallelujah Hills at CMJ probably like 2006 at Arlene's Grocery.
Arlene's Grocery. Yeah. I know. Well,
coming up here, like, and I obviously like I love the city and I love the videos, and coming up here and then going to this like 20-person bar, I was like, oh my God, this is what I miss. These shows are what I miss. This is like, cause this was Santa Cruz, and this is like, oh, this was the indie rock thing that I missed for years.
Right. Yeah. Cause so much of it gets so much bigger, and it's hard to find that, kind of organic, less corporate feel, even in a venue. But, you seeing us in 2006, we just played our 20th anniversary show, like matched it up with the first night of the first show. And at a certain point I said, how many people were here at the first show? And like a dozen hands went up, and I was like, this is just, what an amazing thing. And we're pretty lucky. It felt amazing. It felt terrific.
Is it all the same guys?
No. I mean, but three of us since that beginning are the same guys. And then the other 3 for 10 years and some more. So it was turbulent for the first, 7, 8 years. And then it kind of evened out.
What does turbulent mean?
Turbulent means people left or were quitting or were fired or one.
I mean, well, so it means what it sounds like.
I'm sure I've mentioned a drummer quit on stage during a show, and it was like we're younger and stupider, and but also didn't know how to articulate what we want, maybe, and certainly no one's making a heap of money from it. So that's what I mean by turbulent.
Let's put this in context too. I mean, talk. You can kind of frame this from your perspective, because I'm kind of curious. So 2006. So we're talking like not super long after. I mean, this is kind of really the beginnings of the ends, or like the kind of middles of the beginnings of the end. And CMJ was great, and it was very much like, it was very South by Southwesty. It was all over the city, and it was kind of the place where I think a lot of indie bands were playing to get signed, and were expecting it to be sort of like a next step. Is that kind of where you were at that point, playing at that show?
No, we were on a label already. But you are right. It was the end of a thing, and it was that blog band period where the blogs had as much influence as like Rolling Stone or Spin. And if a couple of us specific kind of music blogs wrote about, we had like 3 record deals, which is nuts. And we went with one. And so we were that was a Misra showcase, you saw, Misra record showcase. But yeah, it was kind of like, I don't know if it would be revisionist history for me to say it felt I could see it on the decline, but I don't know. Yes, that seems like the tail end of something. I don't know how to articulate it exactly, but
it was clear. And I'm coming at this from the I've been in journalism for all that time too, so I'm coming at from the perspective of knowing that like my industry was dying, and it's been clear that it's happening. It's obviously like it's certainly accelerated, but the writing was on the wall. And I'm wondering, like, especially in the early days though, like how much of that turbulence, that quitting on stage, like really comes down to different expectations about where the band can go at that stage.
Probably very little, to be honest. There was some of that, but I think for the most part, everyone was pretty realistic. And I would keep myself up at night like, well, if we don't tour X weeks a year, does that mean we're a real band? Just like weird things that no one thinks about, but maybe the meanest person on the internet and the person in the band, so it was just, for me, it's always been about how creative can we get, how much fun can we have doing it, and, to a certain extent, how long can we do this? Because I really like things that go on a long time, stories or bands, or now, of course, some go on too long, but, I like things that take a long time to express or fulfill its initial promise,
Yeah. And you also apparently like, coming back to projects that you've dreamt of.
That's right. Yeah. Deck. Yes. Should I explain what Deck is?
Well, yeah. No, I was thinking about this. I was thinking about this from the perspective of like, I'm not going to throw out any examples for very obvious reasons, but ideas that I had when I was 21, and the reasons why none of them materialized, but also like,
yeah,
I don't know that I'm just impressed that you. I don't know. Well, let me start with this. Was it just sort of sitting ruminating the entire time? Was it something that you expected to go back to?
Expected is the wrong word, but I kept thinking about it. And unlike other ideas, I dropped them, stopped thinking about them, or started thinking of them as bad ideas. And I continued to think of this as like a cool concept for a record, which is one song for every card in a deck of cards, 4 albums, 52 songs, 2 jokers. And so, and in fact, last time I saw you in person, we were getting a drink, and I said, I'm writing 52 songs. And you said, Ryan, that's too many songs.
It's a lot of songs.
But I just thought, I fell in love with the idea. And coming out of COVID, it was like, well, now's the time. I can't believe we made it through, and I can't believe we're still a band. And what's the biggest idea we could take a swing at? And it was still there waiting for me. So off we went.
Conceptually, beyond just, I'm going to write 52 songs, what is the idea?
Sure. The idea is, I think a deck of playing cards is really interesting in that it is a lot of different things. It's games. It's like a cult way to read the future. It's art. It's math, and it's in everybody's home. Literally everybody has a deck of cards in their junk drawer in the kitchen or somewhere in the house. And so I just think it's like this invisible thing that's inside every single home. And wouldn't it be fun to play within the parameters of it and just make something that matched that ubiquitous item. Yeah. And then that was the biggest idea. And then we kept drilling in, and, I learned so much about how rules help creativity when writing the Astral Weeks book. And so those played in here, just like keep making rules for what diamonds is, keep making rules for what clubs is. And that informed the project up front and as we went as well.
Let's talk about that. Obviously, we've probably a couple of times we've talked about the book writing process on the show, but there are fairly, it's a linear book, right? And it's a nonfiction book. So, there are very clear parameters and guardrails in that way. What did the experience of writing that teach you that you could possibly apply to a 4-album set of records based on cards?
Well, I really think it's about, I think a lot of people think, hey man, rules are for squares and they kill creativity. Me and editor Ed Park developing the rules for that book, I really think is one of the unspoken secret weapons of why people like that book. It was just that. It was that defining rules doesn't restrict you. It actually is going to, in a way, lift up all the creativity you've already set the table for, kind of. Am I making sense, or am I?
Does. And Ron, you're a smart guy, so that like to write a book you need rules, like, right?
Right.
Just to like keep yourself like focused. And you know how, like insofar as there are like, quote unquote rules to make an album, I assume at this point, like you largely know what they are.
But I would say, Brian, when I was writing that book, my first book, I didn't, of course, I inherently knew books you have to have rules to be good, but I was not behaving in that way. And I was kind of unraveling in some senses, extremely focused and saying things to Ed, like the book has to be a Noah's Ark of information, just like, and he was like, actually, it could be that, or it could be a good book. I mean, I don't mean to, it's not folklore. I really learned so much from him during that experience. So it was proof that the things that Ed Park thought would benefit the book actually did. So it was learning. It was real learning.
This is something that we haven't touched on, like either on the show or off the show, because I feel like there's this like whole other piece, and it does play into subtitle. It's like A Secret History of Boston in the 60s.
Astro Weeks, A Secret History of 1968.
1960.
Doesn't say Boston in the title. Okay, but it could. It could have.
But effectively, and it sounds like this could have easily have been like, if you went in that direction, your like descent into madness.
And when I was finished, I felt like I came back from somewhere, and there were relationships waiting for me that I just hadn't given enough attention to in my life, and so. It was both the greatest adventure, and I'm so proud of it, and also like a tough thing to remember a little bit, not wholly, but a little bit.
I'm looking at this at the point from the point of view of you set out to, I think you set out to write a book about what the hell was Van Morrison doing in Boston? Why was he in Boston to do Astral Weeks, right? That's effectively the premise of it, and then it became like something larger than that, and that's where it could have been easy to just completely like dive off the deep end, because you did start like it became more and more, and maybe that's where the sort of the rules and the guidelines start coming in, because that's when it could have just been like an encyclopedic volume of all the weird shit that was happening in Boston around the time.
And it is, but it's within reason. And, but suddenly, like you said, I thought I was just going to figure out why Van Morrison was here. And suddenly I'm trying to figure out if this cult leader is really dead or disappeared or still living, like things got weird pretty quick in a tangible way, I was interacting with those folks, the surviving members of the cult, on a weekly basis. So.
Insofar as there are rules with the suits, roughly speaking, what are they?
Okay, yeah, we can do this. So, Diamonds was supposed to be, by the time we had to record Diamonds, we wanted to make that album comprised of the grandest compositions and sounding songs, things that were worthy of an I'm You follow-up, which was our 2019 record. And so those go there. Then
this is like an album. Like this could be a standalone album, kind of.
Yeah, I think all four do work alone, and also sort of continuing some of the lyrical themes of I'm You in there, not strictly, but yes. And then with Clubs, it was like, let's harken back to how we started, loud, fast, punky, and let's do a lot of those songs like we haven't done in a long time. What it did was it made. We never would have made Clubs if we had to make one record. We never would have made Hearts if we had to make one record. It forced us into this weird spot where we made at least 3 other records that we never would have if we only had to make one. So, continuing with the rules though, Hearts, if the band couldn't hear an arrangement and it just seemed like it should be more of a solo or sparse thing, that was being dedicated to Hearts. And those were the saddest songs as well, or, the most heartbroken songs were headed that way. And then Spades is, a spade is a shovel. and there's a shovel on the cover, and it's us digging, I think, for something new or to pile all of the other 3 together in a dirt pile. It's just more experimental than all the rest. It's just the weirdest one is Spades.
Before this conversation as well, you did like a really short, like a 5-minute video where you're like, hey, it should probably explain this.
Oh, yeah.
I think it came out in like May, and you're like, this is coming out. I know obviously there's a Patreon, and those people kind of know what's going on. And there's that was a real clip from FMU, right? Of the guy just being completely
baffled
by what he just played.
And it's why I made the video.
It's a very funny clip. Like, it really is.
Yes. A DJ on FMU lovingly played a song that we released early as a single, and then tried to, with Sadie, it was Crush All Night, and then tried to explain what the forthcoming project was that it was from, and just immediately got tripped up and said, like, I don't know what this thing is. And I was like, oh no, he's a professional. So that was an attempt to kind of straighten out what deck is, and maybe it did the trick, maybe it didn't.
One, it's just funny to hear somebody say like, oh no. Somebody with like such tight control of everything else to just hear them say, oh no, is very funny.
Yeah, he goes, oh no.
We're sitting here talking about it, but I'm also wondering, like, is there value? Is there value in, like, do you think that there is value in people like having all this contextual information in coming to it? I mean, I guess maybe it might make it more interesting to seek it out, but do you think that I don't know, that it opens it up in a way that it might not otherwise?
I think you can go pretty deep into looking at the whole thing as a whole and learn a lot of interesting things, but we very purposely made it so it didn't require that. Like, you can play any one song on the radio or like one song. And we, told people, shuffle these, I probably said it in that video you watched where, people get very defensive about big projects. Don't, you got to listen to the whole thing. And of course we want that, but we also want people to do whatever they want to do with the deck. Maybe just pull random 13 cards, make their version of the record, or like 1 or 2 songs. It was just meant, we didn't want to get strict about that, because it just seems bad for the soul or something. I don't know. It's just like, if you make something this big, you got to be clear. You're not being like, well, everyone has to drop everything and listen to this, but if you get pulled in naturally and you take years and you get into the whole thing, that's great. But that was never on our list of demands up front,
Well, you certainly don't want to be like, this is only good if you listen to it this way.
Right.
It can only be enjoyed in this way.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be willfully difficult.
Trying to think back to, I mean, I'm not surprised that I said 52 songs is too many songs, but I'm sort of thinking about it, and I think what my perspective would have been, or, at least thinking about it now, it would have kind of been a surprise that not the idea, but that the fact that you had 52 songs was not in and of itself a result of.
Well, none of those songs existed during the pandemic. When we announced the project, we had 2 or 3 songs, and one is from a solo EP I put out. Everything else, and it was part of, what we proposed was, there's 2.5 years. That's all the writing, recording, and mixing and designing of the cards of deck. It all happened with that 2.5 years. So I came up with the idea that, the Hills practice on Monday nights. If I always brought a new song in, eventually we'd have too many and we couldn't fail, in a sense that we would have that many songs. So that is what happened. And that, once you set your mind and say you need to write blank number of songs, at least for me, it just started to come natural after a while, and weird when I stopped too.
It seems like suddenly having 52 songs could have potentially have been the result of
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I see what you're saying now, Brian. Okay, yeah, I'm a little slow, but I got it. So yeah, well, remember that thing that came out of the pandemic, revenge spending? Did you ever hear that term? It was like people like, F it, I'm going to go on a vacation I can't afford. It was just people making up for lost time. And so they were kind of doing unexpected things, often with money. And so I have said this is like our revenge creativity. Like, we had a good momentum going. We were throwing off course like so many people with the pandemic. And we thought, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. It built up. The release valve that I, myself, and the band had of one album every 2 years or whatever the cadence is was gone. And so things did build up. Yeah.
I remember because I think the last record was what, 2019?
Very late 2019.
Very late 2019. And you know how when you're getting to know a record, you kind of associate it with like a place and time.
Yeah.
And I remember very distinctly because I was in Tokyo at the time and I was just like listening to that record in Tokyo for some reason. But also like, and I think you got this a lot at the time. And I don't know if you believe this, but like for me, I mean, I have a very, as I'm sure I've told you a lot, like I really like your first record. And to me, this is like, that was your strongest, like the one that I really like, I connected with this most strongly since the first record. And I think it might be the strongest record. So you're right. In the standpoint that like, I think, you were really, you're a band, you've been doing this for a really long time, but I do think that, you were, getting to some next level. And then, obviously we all slammed into a brick wall at the same time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you can't, you're going to be emotionally upset about that. We all were about their different things, but I don't know what am I trying to say? I mean,
when that happens, obviously, obviously like the timeline kept moving and moving and, we're like, oh, maybe this will be over like in a month and then we'll, but in terms of somebody who I know obviously like, were you working at a university or a library?
No, for university out of theater.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you do have this job, but obviously like you're a writer and you're a musician as well. In terms of like release valve, in terms of creativity, was a lot of it kind of trying to sort of like readjust and trying to figure out like, hey, I can't lead a band, I can't tour, like what can I do? How can I express myself?
In a proper way. I figure out how to do it every day in little ways that maybe don't add up to anything, but you're right. Like, during the pandemic, there was a second book and book deal that I eventually walked away from. And there was a TV show idea I had that I wrote a screen. So I was doing a lot of things you could do solitary, but none of which came out.
I'm not going to say any specifics, but I think we might have talked about what the book was.
Yes, I'm sure we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you don't want to talk about like the subject matter, right?
Well, not right now.
Yeah. What I do want to know is like why, at least at the time, that it wasn't the right project for the time.
It was about, it was purely about, when you write a biography or something close to a biography about someone and participants many are still alive and probably not uber famous and still have to get jobs and still have to put their kids through school. And the story has parts where, maybe you're not such a good person. There's a reluctance to talk, and I totally get it.
The people who you're interviewing, you mean? Like
key buy-in from the key players.
Yeah.
About talking, and I totally get it. So it was not. it was not anything I was bitter about, but it's an interesting thing, where I think you and I are interested in a lot of people who we think the world of, or we think are maybe famous and they're not, or, they're known by a very small circle of people. But, and so with that, you can write a biography about, let's just pick a name, Paul McCartney or someone huge and still living, and you can air all the dirty laundry, and mostly it's not going to affect their day-to-day lives.
After weeks, we're talking decades removed, but there are still people that are alive, so you didn't know about.
Right.
So, there still was kind of a little bit of a tightrope walk there.
Oh yeah, for sure. And, I was very respectful about what people wanted to say and didn't want to say, except when it came to the cult and, them lying to me. And, they lied to me left and right. And at a certain point I was like, well, I'm just going to put all this in because I know it's the truth. So, yeah.
The book did really well. And I'm kind of curious, how similar, if at all, a book cycle is to an album cycle, as far as the book was very successful, right? I mean, it certainly it was more successful, I'm guessing, than you thought it was going to be.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It was everywhere, and I'm guessing that much in the same way that if your album takes off faster than you think it does, then everybody's asking where's the next this thing?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, even my good friends give me a hard time about that. Like, Patrick from Titus Andronicus.
Patrick gives everybody a hard time about everything.
He'll enjoy this moment of the podcast.
Did you listen to the Valentine's Day episode that he was on the podcast for?
Oh, actually, no. Somehow I missed that.
Somehow the one time he was on the show, it was in person, and it was on Valentine's Day. It's the two of us sitting in a room. So
I'll go back. But what I mean to say is, like you mentioned, I have a day job, and one of the superpowers of being an artist and having a day job is you only say yes to what you really want to make. And so, of course, and also I do enjoy, to a certain extent, confounding expectations. So, if everyone was clamoring for a second book immediately, my immediate knee-jerk reaction was, well, now it's time to make an album, And then, during the pandemic, things I worked on that came out, the Morphine liner notes was like a novella about that band. So
I didn't know about. How did that?
Oh yeah, Light in the Attic reissued the final 2 Morphine records. I love that band, and I did a deep dive with both sets of liner notes. Yeah, it's so interesting, Brian. When you release something in a book form on a publisher like Penguin, it just gets reams more attention, even if you worked on something else just as hard. It's interesting to me. No, you're right. A lot of people don't know I did those liner notes at all.
Process of that, I mean, were you interviewing people? Was it like writing a biography?
Yes, I interviewed everyone who was still alive, basically all the primary players, and Mark's widow, Sabine, who was extremely generous, and a really interesting working relationship, because I'm trying to tell a story about the worst thing that's ever happened to her. And same goes for Dana, the saxophone player. And so, you want to get the right amount of detail in storytelling, but this is the thing that derailed their life. So it was such an emotional learning experience doing that. But yeah, and Billy Conway, the drummer, died while I was working on it. It was it had to be one of his last interviews. So,
the book project that we're very much talking around is what I think that it was, that this kind of was very similar in that
a little bit,
as far as talking about really sort of difficult moments.
Yeah, it's true. But they all want the story told, and are willing to participate.
Yeah.
And so
more time has passed, which is probably...
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was a pleasure to write those. And, I used to sneak out of my parents' house in high school and see that band. So suddenly to be writing their liner notes, I don't know. I'm very grateful. I get to do all these things that, at the very least, I find super interesting.
We were talking before we started recording, and I'm like, 2026 has been a very good year for me. Like things, like a lot of stuff has been lining up, and there's a lot of, and I feel like a lot of things that I've sort of set in motion have been paying off. And I think that in a lot of ways, this album is that, in that, like you're kind of calling in favors, right? I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like you obviously Patrick and Craig and Sadie and all these like wonderful artists here and stuff. And it was just really, it is a sort of like culmination. Obviously, there's 20 years, but it's this culmination of like all this work and all these things you've kind of been like putting out in the world for so long.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. And Dana from Morphine appears, and even Sabine does one spoken line. So, the Morphine project bled into the deck as well. And, we never do ask for favors like this. We never bother people. Can we open for you, or can you be on the record? But I did decide that it would be so fun if anyone who was willing did do something on deck, that I did start to make those asks. And 99% of people said yes. It was incredible. I mean, just the names you said, but there's so many more. Like Clint from Mission of Burma is the lead vocalist on one song. I mean, I'm telling you right now, and it is true, but I can hardly believe it,
Except like, I'm not at all surprised that he was game, just like having spoken with him. He just seems like a guy who would be, you know what I mean? Like,
I know, but you still,
Sadie, it's like,
right. I know.
This is a lesson. I'm saying this, and obviously, like, nobody who's listening on this is probably going to be able to get Clint Conley for their album if you don't know them. But yeah, this is an obvious lesson that like, that you have to sort of keep learning over and over again in your life. But like, so there is just so many opportunities that you don't have because you talk yourself out of it because you don't ask.
That's true. That's true. And talking myself into writing all those songs and to ask all those people if they would appear on it, I just got into this go for it mindset that I'm not in right now. I can tell I'm like somewhere, I have a different mode going on, and I would probably, but what I mean by this is it's snowballs. Once you keep telling yourself, yes, keep going, ask this person, write that song, there is an internal momentum that builds that I wrote out till the end.
What's the whole string sections and Nigeria and Bagpiper? What's the story there? Is I just like go on Fiverr?
I did just go on Fiverr, but Brian, you don't understand. You know what Fiverr is, and you understand it from the tech world I feel like the music world has not really discovered this yet.
It's kind of like going on like they know what Cameo is. It's kind of like going on Cameo.
Exactly. Like, I've always wanted to make a record that was like commensurate with, a major label record taking a bet on, Randy Newman's second album. Like his first one flopped. Let's give him more money. So we can't obviously afford that same orchestra, but we can afford 8 bars of an orchestra, or 4 bars of a choir, utilizing the magic of the internet and, paying people for very small bits of work. At the beginning of the pandemic, we did not know as a band how to remotely record, and to learn that and get good at it. And to the point where we are getting overdubs from Nigeria and Scotland is incredible to me. I mean, we literally didn't know how to do this when we started.
I like that too, because it's almost like treating this piece of music like an instrument.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think. Well, wait. So rephrase that. How do you mean exactly?
If you were in the Randy Newman situation, or like whatever, like what the the obvious example is like Paul Simon, right? Paul Simon,
right, right.
Lady Smith, and you've got the full access to like just like this great chorus, this great band, but you didn't have the full access. You just had access to a snippet. So you had to use it just like a piece.
Yeah.
Something
But
to
you
incorporate
you
into
do,
the music.
it's almost like a piggy bank. If you do a penny every day, suddenly, this thing sounds pretty grand. So that was the idea, to just, we can do the parts that we can do this in pieces slowly over time, not too slowly, but I think we're saying the same thing, that it was, I don't know. I blanked. You got me.
You're a lifelong Boston guy, right?
Yeah.
I've been in Queens for a really long time. I moved up here. I'm slowly like making my way up there, and I'm presently dating somebody from Vermont.
Yeah.
Which is making me have to grapple with the fact that there is an entirely other part of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
That occasionally you get reminded of.
Yeah.
I've talked to several people. Actually, the one time I went to North Adams was to see Jeff Mango's first show back at the Mass.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I read an interesting review around Deck. I can't remember who it was from, but they really kind of pointed to Massachusetts being sort of a through line.
Well, yeah, and someone else also talked about it being very New Englandy, which, I just love that. I love New England, but it's also a little bit like
I was with Jonathan Richman.
Asking. I do love him.
You really did just inadvertently.
I know. I totally, own up to it. Well, Brian, I can't tell the whole story, but I met him.
Oh, I think yeah.
Did I maybe I did tell you the whole story already. Anyways,
yeah. You can't tell it on the pod.
No, I can't. Anyways, New England, love it. But it's like, when I was surprised by those reviews, just in the sense that, like, asking a fish about water, I've lived here all my life, so it's what I know, and naturally it seeps into kind of most of what I make, I guess. And I'm proud of that. I think it's we're New England. We're about to secede from the rest of the country, and and become a safe zone.
I've been thinking about it too. Like, obviously, like, and the times that, like, I've seen you and around Boston is because I've been up there for work, because obviously there's, all the schools up there and all the research happening. But, I just interviewed somebody who was, she was a researcher at Lowell, and she just moved on to Amherst. And obviously there's, there's all these bands out of like UMass, and there is like, there's like Dinosaur. There's all these like, cool bands from the rest of Massachusetts. And I'm kind of curious, like, do you feel like you have a relationship with the broader state of Massachusetts, having lived in Boston your whole life?
Oh yeah. I mean, I have spent heaps of time all over the state and all over New England, just if you live here, that naturally happens. And they do have different flavors. That's a weird word to use there, but,
you got Cherry Garcia, you got
your Cherry Garcia, you got your, that's Vermont. Speaking of Vermont. Yeah. My girlfriend Maya's from Worcester, which is central mid Massachusetts, so, yeah, I'm not someone who's just stuck inside. I've never been like, oh, I don't leave Boston city limits, if that makes any sense. And it's good. I mean, it's different. It's different, but I love it all,
Yeah. So reflecting on that, and reflecting on keeping a band going, and being able to keep a band going at a certain level, outside of obviously like New York or Los Angeles or like Nashville, it's interesting to have Boston as like as a home base, and how has that really sort of played a role in not so much your formation, but like maybe your longevity?
Maybe it's interesting. What do people think of when they think of Boston bands? They might think of Aerosmith or the Mighty Mighty Bosstones or Dropkick Murphys. Probably the most. I don't know. It's like that thing in the book. There's a chapter on this MGM Records disaster called the Bosstown Sound that they tried to just generate out of whole cloth, and they picked 3 bands that didn't sound like each other and tried to say this was the Bosstown Sound, and it was a mess. And it was like an early fan backlash against advertising, at least music advertising. Everyone was like, "This is phony bullshit," and I kind of feel that's evocative of like Boston has all types of music, and we're one of them. And is that what you're asking, or
No, I'm asking less about the scene and more. I don't know. I guess, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but and this is sort of me reflecting as like, again, I lived in New York for so long, and as I was living there, it felt like I was going through the ringer the entire time, and it felt like there were a lot of things that, I think I might have talked to Ezra actually about this when she moved out there initially, but that living in a city like Boston, maybe does afford you the ability to continue to do creative things that you might not be able to do in a place that is otherwise completely unaffordable.
Oh yeah. I mean, we're getting there, and it is expensive for sure. But I guess now that I'm hearing more of what you're saying, I think there isn't really an industry built around bands recording. The music business doesn't live here. So could that play into things? Possibly. I mean, it's, I don't feel we owe anything except to ourselves in the band and the people who are fans of us to an extent. We want to maintain independence and be able to decide to do anything we want, but we also appreciate them so much. And that's a very different relationship than if you're trying to get a record deal or try to co-write a song that becomes a hit for someone else, which I'd be interested in doing. I don't know. I'm rambling now, Brian.
Are you excited that Dickie's trying to get the Bosstones back together?
No, I'm not. I mean, he was I had my moment with them in high school, cool band. But, when he was, a couple things happened. I think he came out as an anti-vaxxer, and then they released that tone deaf George Floyd song. And the video was the dancing guy in the Bosstones.
The Bosstone, yeah.
Yeah, it was him. The video for the George Floyd song was him dancing through various neighborhoods of Boston, most of which were affluent white areas of the city. I think that the video is scrubbed from the internet. I don't believe you can see it anymore. But anyways, we wish them all the best as we do all Bosstones.
Do you know what the name of Dickie's short-lived band after the Bosstones was?
Oh my God. Yes. I can't pull it, but it's
that
perfect.
Was made up entirely, I think, of anti-vaxxers.
That's right. Or just, people did their own research.
I think it was entirely.
Okay. What was it?
The Defiant.
The Defiant. Yeah. Cool as hell, man.
The album came out in June.
Yeah.
June.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you're kind of in a, not being super stressed about trying to birth another creative thing in the world. Is it as far as like this being, it sounds like maybe as much of a major project as putting the book together. Is it a case where you feel like you do kind of need to take some time off?
You know what, Brian? For the first time, my answer is yes. There's 10-year track that started right around the book where I either by choice or I had to have something, and I couldn't take a break for whatever reason. We could get into it, but we probably need a therapist or something. But I finished this and I felt so great and satisfied, and I've actually taken time off and just relaxed and enjoyed myself. And, it's been so good. I can't recommend it enough.
No, weird.
It is weird. Yeah.
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 To actually be happy with something you put in the world. And
you know what? I took a walk with my friend Jenny about a month ago, and we were walking down the street, and she was telling me all her updates, and they were all good. And she said, it's so weird that, and then I joined in with her and said that you finally figured out your life just as we slide into full fascism. And that's what she was going to say. And the fact that we both said the same thing, we even though it was a tragic thing to say, we kind of hugged and jumped up and down. But I do feel that way. It's like you figure one thing out and other things go to hell. Maybe there's never going to be an ideal everything in your life,
I was working on, I switched jobs in March, and I was working on a lot of bureaucratic reasons, but I'm doing a weekly newsletter and a weekly podcast through there, and it took a long time to get them both out. And I was like, I can't remember what big dumb political thing had just happened, but we were on the eve of the podcast coming out, and I was just like, can we just push the nuclear war off 1 more week?
Right. Right. I know. You start to think crazy thoughts like that. Yeah. And, I think of Rob Reiner dying without getting to see Trump out of office.
Mm-hmm.
I know it opens a million cans. I know, but, I just realized how you don't, I guess I always had some foolish delusional thought growing up that I would die at a point where the storylines would all wrap up. And the very likely truth is that almost none of them will be whenever I do go. And I just have to, it takes some adjusting to incorporate that into your worldview.
There's a really nice sentiment in, I can't remember where you wrote it, or maybe you said it in an interview, but it was about this album. And it was, and then there was this point when you're like, yeah, well, I can't pretend like I'm not technically middle-aged by the definition of being middle-aged.
Uh-huh.
And you said something along the lines of hopefully, I will continue to live as long as I've lived up to this point, and that I can use the things that I've learned up until now.
Oh yeah. It was in the sort of note I wrote the day it came out. Yeah. Just about, what a thrill what an absolute joy and thrill it is, even as you experience and witness so many horrors in the world, to go through life, have these great friends, make things with your friends, have your heart broken, have it fall in love. I mean, it sounds corny as hell, but it really is beautiful, and I do try to learn from everything and roll it forward.
I've never been to Stockholm, I've enjoyed its syndrome. I've never messed with Texas, but I fucked the state. Resist as you might, this is the time of your life. A New York minute could last for an eternity. So if this must be the place, let the maps all get erased. And if we're dying on the vine, get my lawyer on the line. We'll burn this atlas down to the